Hi guys, it's Jane from Megovan, and today we're going to talk about Boromir. It has been brought to my attention that some fans of the Lord of the Rings trilogy are split on Boromir. Some see him as a selfish and aggressive character who only joined the Fellowship to serve his own agenda. Others see him as a victim of his circumstances and duties to Gondor, who was unfortunately manipulated by the ring. However, to really appreciate Boromir, it's important to understand that like many interesting characters, there is a lot more going on than these surface level observations. Boromir is a character who had his own unique journey and experiences that established him as a certified badass years even before the War of the Ring. Whether you love Boromir or not, I think we can all agree that Boromir is certainly more complex than his on-screen adaptation shows. In this video, we're going to do a little analysis of this character by going over some key moments of Boromir's journey. And with that, I hope you'll agree with me that Boromir was driven by honor and duty, and his only real fault was prioritizing the defense of his country in the face of certain doom.
The city of Osgiliath has been reclaimed for Gondor!
Boromir is a lot like many heroic characters whose tales are told in epic poetry or whose names grace our history books. Much like Achilles or Julius Caesar, Boromir was a character whose interest lay in war, weaponry, and stories of battles of the past. When we compare Boromir to the other men in Tolkien's story, he's arguably one of the most classically heroic characters. It's a pretty safe bet that Tolkien's inspiration for Boromir was based on Roland of Charlemagne. Roland of Charlemagne was a historic military leader who, like Boromir, carried a white horn. The story of Roland is told in the Song of Roland, which is an 11th century epic poem that is also the oldest surviving major work of French literature. It's interesting because Boromir and Roland have similar characteristics. Both are tall, noble, and strong warriors who carry a large horn that you can blow in. Both are directly related to a powerful ruler, Boromir being the son of the steward of Gondor, and Roland was the nephew of Charlemagne himself. When the time came for them to protect their allies, they both made a noble last stand against the armies of evil. In both situations, when it was clear that they would lose their fight, they both blew their horn as a way to call for aid, but their allies came too late to save them and they ultimately died a noble and impactful death. Boromir is not the only character that Tolkien pulled from history. It's pretty much agreed that Beowulf inspired the plot of The Hobbit, and certain elements of Macbeth are carried into The Lord of the Rings. Let's continue on the topic of history, but let's focus on the history of Middle-earth. Boromir was named after a famous captain named Boromir. For the sake of simplicity, we'll refer to this Boromir as Boromir I going forward in this video. So, Boromir I was the 11th ruling steward of Gondor and lived about 5 centuries before our Boromir, who we'll call Boromir II in this video. Boromir I is mentioned in the Silmarillion, and what we're told is that Boromir I was noble, had a fair face, a strong body and will, and that during his prime he was a great captain, and that even the Witch King of Angmar feared Boromir I. Boromir I was the son of Denethor I, just as Boromir II, or Boromir, was the son of Denethor II. Now, Boromir, was born in Gondor and was the eldest son of Denethor, who was the steward of Gondor. Denethor adored his firstborn son Boromir, and I mean adored.
Where is he? Where is Gondor's finest? Where is my firstborn? Father!
That's fine. It's important to love your children and to wish good things for them. But Boromir took things a little too far when his second son was born 5 years later. While he continued to give Boromir all the attention in the world, Denethor wanted nothing to do with his second son Faramir.
He loves you, father.
Do not trouble me with Faramir. I know his uses and they are few.
He didn't exactly hate Faramir, but as Boromir grew, Boromir became super popular in Gondor in a way that he had never experienced. So what he did was that he kind of started living vicariously through his favorite son. I don't think he hated Faramir, but unlike Boromir, Faramir had a mind of his own about a lot of stuff, and although Faramir was also a brave warrior, he did not care much for battle and needless danger like Boromir. Instead, thanks to a relationship he had developed with Gandalf, Faramir was of gentle nature and learned to value knowledge. Unfortunately, his friendship with Gandalf did not help his relationship with Denethor. Denethor saw Faramir's relationship with Gandalf as a betrayal to his loyalty to Gondor and his lineage. Loyalty to Gondor was something that Boromir got right, and Denethor loved him for that. What's interesting is that even with all this love, attention, and the terrible example that his father was leading, Boromir was a humble and good big brother. Boromir was 5 years old when Faramir was born, and what Boromir did was that he helped and protected his younger brother. As the two grew up, Boromir took on more of the responsibility for Faramir's upbringing than his father ever did, especially following the death of their mother. Boromir was 10 when his mother died, and this tragedy was a turning point for the family. The death of his wife hit Denethor hard, and as a result, he became reclusive and scary. Boromir tried very hard to get Denethor to acknowledge the younger sibling.
The victory belongs to Faramir also.
But for Faramir, the city would still be standing. Were you not entrusted to protect it?
But in the end, he took to caring for him more to make up for the lack of love from their father.
Remember today, little brother. Today, life is good.
The bond between the two brothers became so strong that it is said that Faramir heard his brother blowing the great horn during the last stand against the Uruk-hai. Now, on top of being the glue that kept the family in one piece, Boromir grew to become a noble warrior. He was interested in arms, warfare, and tales of battle, and served as a commander to the military of Gondor. The main defense point of Gondor was in Osgiliath, and Osgiliath was the theater for many battles going back 500 years, all the way back to the time when Boromir I was in charge of Gondor's defenses. Under the command of our Boromir, and this is before we first meet Boromir in the Fellowship of the Ring, the men of Gondor were able to push Sauron's forces out of Osgiliath. So right before Boromir arrives in Rivendell at the Council of Elrond, Boromir's job was to lead and maintain the defenses of Gondor, and he didn't really pay much attention to the affairs going on outside of Gondor. Obviously, he knew that there was this bad ring that existed, that this ring once belonged to Sauron, and that Sauron commanded the army of orcs that kept attacking his beloved Gondor. But he didn't really know much more than that. And he kind of got involved in the whole Fellowship of the Ring thing by accident. On the eve of Sauron's attack on Osgiliath, both Faramir and Boromir had prophetic dreams about the mysterious shards of Narsil, a halfling, Isildur's Bane, and this place called Ilamdris that they needed to go to urgently. Boromir and Faramir didn't understand what any of this meant, so they took the issue to their father, who told them that Imadris was another word for Rivendell, that Rivendell was located 1,000,000 miles all the way up north, and that Rivendell was where Lord Elrond lived. Since these dreams occurred on the eve of Sauron's attack, it was clear to everyone that somebody had to go to Rivendell and see what was going on. Boromir was the one who was picked for the job.
I trust this mission only to your brother, the one who will not fail me.
Boromir didn't know much about the elves and Rivendell. In fact, his journey to Rivendell took him 110 days because poor Boromir had no idea where Rivendell actually was. At one point, he even lost his horse and he had to do a part of his journey on foot. Luckily, he bumped into Éomer on the Cap of Rohan, who had a horse to spare, and eventually Boromir made it to Rivendell just in time for the Council of Elrond. Once there, he told the group about the dreams that led him to Rivendell, and one by one, the answers to the riddles of his dream were revealed. First, Aragorn brought out the shards of Narsil. Boromir learned that Narsil was the sword that was wielded by King Elendil during the War of the Last Alliance. Since then, the broken pieces were kept in the House of Elrond and were passed down as a kind of heirloom to the heirs of Isildur. And at this point in the story, Narsil was reforged by the elves and given to Aragorn, the future king of Gondor. The second part of the riddle was about the halflings. So when Frodo showed up with the ring to Rivendell and he accepted the job to destroy it. That pretty much solved that part. The last part was the whole Isildur's Bane bit. That was solved when Frodo brought forth the ring, and Gandalf and Elrond were able to confirm that yes, that was Isildur's Bane. Remember that that after Sauron's defeat in the War of the Last Alliance, Isildur took the ring and refused to destroy it, and so as far as the elves were concerned, the ring was now Isildur's Bane. And if you Google the definition of Bane, Google spits out a cause for great distress or annoyance, so the elves were spot on. Now, all of the pieces were put together and this dream made sense. Let's take a moment to look at the situation from Boromir's perspective. So yes, Boromir showed up to Rivendell to get answers for his mysterious dreams, but the other important item on his agenda, and probably what fueled him to travel over 100 days to go to Rivendell, was that his hope was to find a tool or a strategy that could A, help Gondor in its defense from the enemy, and B, keep his people safe.
Long has my father, the steward of Gondor, kept the forces of Mordor at bay. By the blood of our people are your lands kept safe.
While Boromir was conscious of the dangers of the ring, the way he saw things was that it made more sense to use the ring against Sauron's armies, and that using the ring against Sauron would help drive the orcs away from Gondor and back to Mordor, and as a result, his people would be safe. During the Council of Elrond, he asks them to allow him to take the ring to Gondor to help defend its people.
It is a gift to the foes of Mordor. Why not use this ring?
This request was immediately shut down by Elrond, who correctly stated that the ring would only guide the wielder to an evil end, no matter how good their intentions may be. On top of that, the idea that was submitted and approved was that the person who was the most fit to wield the ring was not a brave and fierce warrior. Instead, the chosen one was Frodo, a 3-foot hobbit. This must have been baffling news for a guy of action, a guy who has been told all his life that glory and supremacy on the battlefield is what keeps nations safe. Despite probably having many reservations about the proposed strategy, Boromir swallowed his pride, and upon Elrond's insistence that destroying the ring would be the only way to keep his people safe, he resigns himself to help destroy the ring and joins the Fellowship of the Ring.
If this is indeed the will of the Council, then Gondor will see it done.
As a member of the Fellowship of the Ring, Boromir found himself in a very dangerous mission to the ends of the earth with a group of strangers, and it's unlikely that any of them would come back alive.
It's not simply walk into Mordor. Its black gates are guarded by more than just orcs. There is evil there that does not sleep.
However, if they did somehow make it back alive, Aragorn was to be the future king of Gondor.
He is Aragorn, son of Arathorn. You owe him your allegiance.
This is Isildur's heir.
And heir to the throne of Gondor.
Remember that until that point, Gondor had been without a king for nearly 1,000 years, and during that time, a line of about 26 stewards were the ones who were the rulers of Gondor until the king would return. Boromir was the next in line of the succession to take the title of steward after his father Denethor. Denethor had been grooming Boromir for this job for his entire life, and you know what? I think Boromir would have been a great steward of Gondor. He didn't inherit his father's shitty qualities, no. Remember that he's the one who made sure that Faramir's life wasn't a living hell. So Boromir has a heart of gold. Not to mention he's a good and respected warrior. I think Boromir was very much looking forward to becoming the 27th steward of Gondor, but because the shards of Narsil were reforged before the Fellowship of the Ring departed on their quest, it was very clear that the job of ruling Gondor would now become Aragorn's, a shabby-looking guy who's been MIA while Boromir maintained the defenses of Gondor.
Gondor has no king. Gondor needs no king.
What this meant is that provided that Frodo managed to destroy the ring, Boromir would no longer be the respected ruler of Gondor that he was groomed to become. Instead, and this is the best case scenario, and this is if everything goes exactly perfectly right, the job title that would be waiting for him when he returned to Gondor would be Advisor to the King of Gondor. So again, what we see is that whether or not the Fellowship succeeds, this quest would not benefit Boromir. If they are successful, he gets demoted, and if they fail, everyone dies. Boromir is not in it for himself at this point. Boromir joined the quest because he knows that destroying the ring would be the only way to keep his people safe. It was good that Boromir joined the Fellowship because his heroism comes out and he made good calls day in and day out that saved the group from a lot of trouble and probably death. For example, in the book, when the company reached Caradhras, Boromir advised that each one of them carry a faggot of wood. This saved the company from freezing to death when they got caught in a blizzard. Also, Boromir fought valiantly when the company was attacked in the chamber of Mazarbul and Moria.
They have a cave troll.
On top of his bravery, I also adore what Jackson did with Boromir's character by giving him an apparent fondness for Merry and Pippin. In the movie, he's seen a lot with them. He's the one who carries them on the mountain on Caradhras. He teaches them how to sword fight and he wrestles with them. He grabs them while they're hopping over the crumbling stairs of Moria. And after leaving Lothlorien, Boromir shares a boat with Merry and Pippin. This is probably done to foreshadow that he would die defending them. It was a really nice touch, and it further pulls at our heartstrings when Boromir eventually meets his end. Now, I want to go over the final days of Boromir to kind of show that yes, although he was a bit of a dick to Frodo, it's important to not judge him too much because he was not a bad guy. On the contrary, Boromir was in fact a victim of the ring. Like many others before him, the ring manipulated Boromir by presenting itself as the key to making all of his dreams come true.
Even now, there is hope left. But I cannot see it.
While Boromir deeply believed in the strength of Gondor, he also knew that Gondor had taken a serious beating and won't be able to withstand continuous assault from Sauron's army of orcs.
Have you so little faith in your own people? Yes, there is weakness, there is frailty, but there is courage also, and honor to be found in men. But you will not see that.
What the ring did was that it latched onto these thoughts and amplified them in his mind, and as a result, this gave Boromir a persistent conviction that he must take the ring from Frodo. This is how the ring operates. It did this to Isildur, Smeagol, Bilbo to a certain extent, and it's doing it to Frodo. And it would have done the same thing to a man or a wizard. This is why Gandalf did not come near the ring with a 10-foot pole. Boromir's slow descent into, not really madness, but obsession with the ring begins after leaving Lothlorien. In the book, what is noted is that in the boats, Boromir was often muttering to himself at times, and he was seemingly unconsciously paddling closer to Frodo in the ring. Once the company reached the shores, they had to decide their next course of action. When Frodo wandered off into the forest to think about it, Boromir casually followed him. Once they were a good distance away from the others, Boromir tried to persuade Frodo to bring the ring to Minas Tirith.
I ask only for the strength to defend my people. If you would but lend me the ring. No.
As Boromir spoke, he was not being dismissive and a dick for the sake of being dismissive and a dick. When Boromir was trying to persuade Frodo to bring the ring to Minas Tirith, it is the lure of the ring that was growing stronger in him. During that moment, he envisioned himself as a mighty king who would overthrow Sauron, rescue his people, and lead Gondor to victory and glory. While he was conscious of the dangers of the ring, at that moment, he saw more sense in using it against Sauron's army to help drive them back to Mordor and away from Gondor. When Frodo refused to accompany him to Minas Tirith, Boromir became enraged, stressed, and tried to take the ring from Frodo by force. Frodo in turn put on the ring and vanished. When Frodo had gone, Boromir was overwhelmed with the realization of what he had done, and he wept and called for Frodo to return, but it was too late.
Frodo? Frodo?
Now we need to slow down for a moment because a lot happened in this one moment, and we need to do a bit of a play-by-play. This is a super important sequence because it's not just Boromir losing his shit. What is happening is when Frodo refuses to give Boromir the ring, it is the ring that latches onto Boromir. It is the ring that is filling him with rage as he attempts to take it by force. It is the ring that makes him behave against his better judgment. The way that the ring is created is that the ring will do what it needs to do and use who it needs to use to get closer to its master. The ring knew that Boromir would be a great puppet because Boromir would do anything he thought could save Gondor. This is very heroic, but it is also his weakness. And the ring knew this, and therefore the ring had its eye fixed on Boromir from the get-go by making Boromir believe that the ring could make Gondor great again. However, as soon as Frodo put on the ring to get away from Boromir, the ring's attention was again directed towards Frodo, and the ring no longer gave a shit about Boromir because as far as the ring was concerned, Boromir had one job to do, and that job was to get the ring to Gondor so that it could be closer to Mordor, to its master, and Boromir failed. So the ring was like, fuck you. The influence of the ring leaves him as quickly as it came, and as a result, when Boromir kind of snaps back to reality, he is extremely remorseful for betraying his honor. The ring played Boromir super dirty. So now, when Boromir returns to the company, he was super ashamed of what he had done and only tells them that he had simply argued with Frodo and that Frodo had disappeared. Merry and Pippin ran off looking for their friend, and Aragorn told Boromir to follow them to guard them. When Boromir found the hobbits, they were surrounded by dozens of orcs. What happens next is arguably Boromir's penance. In a heroic attempt to try to make up for his behavior against Frodo earlier, he fought in defense of Merry and Pippin. Boromir slew dozens of orcs and the rest fled. Things were seemingly okay for a moment, but as he began to lead the hobbits back to the campsite, they were attacked again by at least 100 orcs. It's at that moment that Boromir he sounded the great horn and fought valiantly to prevent the orcs from seizing Merry and Pippin.
The Horn of Gondor. Boromir.
In his defense of Merry and Pippin, Boromir was pierced by numerous arrows, and even when he was getting shot by arrows, he continued to fight and sacrifice himself while attempting to hold off the orcs from carrying off and taking Merry and Pippin. Unfortunately, after getting hit by too many arrows, he fell and the hobbits were taken prisoner. Moments later, Aragorn arrived and Boromir was still alive when Aragorn found him. I think on top of his physical injuries from the arrows, Boromir was also suffering from severe psychological shock after being manipulated by the ring, and saw his death as his price to pay for allowing the ring to corrupt his mind. It's interesting because at that moment, he's not placing the blame on the ring, but with himself. And while he's laying there dying, he admits to Aragorn that he had tried to take the ring from Frodo and asked Aragorn to forgive him. Aragorn assured him that he was forgiven and that he had redeemed himself before he died. Boromir's death is really well executed in Jackson's trilogy, and we get that he dies confident that Aragorn will take care of Gondor. Now, in the book, his devotion to Gondor is the only thing on his mind. In the book, Boromir's final words are, "Farewell, Aragorn, go to Minas Tirith and save my people. I have failed." What we see here is that even when he is dying, Boromir still made pleas for his country and the people he has sworn to protect, and recognizes Aragorn as the one who could continue his duty in his absence. Aragorn then replies, and we see this in the movie, and it's one of my favorite Aragorn lines. "I do not know what strength is in my blood, but I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall, nor our people fail."
I do not know what strength is in my blood, but I swear to you, I will not let the White City fall. Our people fail.
With those words, Boromir allowed himself to die in peace, knowing that Gondor was in good hands. 3 nights later, Boromir's body washed up by the banks of the Anduin River and Osgiliath before Faramir. As mentioned earlier, the two brothers did share a great bond, and Faramir had heard the great horns sounding in the distance when Boromir blew it when he was in need. Faramir and Aragorn eventually meet up later in Minas Tirith in the Return of the King, and by that point, Faramir knew that the king was returning because earlier when he bumped into Frodo and Sam, Frodo had casually mentioned that he was traveling with this guy Aragorn, who was a descendant of kings. But remember that unlike Boromir, Faramir did not care much about triumph or glory and was not threatened by the return of the king. When Aragorn did return and claimed his place as the heir to the throne, and in recognition of the contributions of Faramir and perhaps for the bravery of Boromir as well, he officially confirmed Faramir and his descendants as stewards of Gondor, and even granted Faramir the princedom of Ithilien. And this ensured that the family line will always have a close place as counselors to the king. So at the end, the family continued to have a say in the affairs of Gondor, and Gondor is now a strong nation once more. Gondor is now being led by a very capable king. I think Boromir would have no doubt been proud, and although he's not alive to see Gondor prosper, Boromir will always be remembered as a mighty and honorable warrior. That's it for today. I hope you agree with me that he's pretty great and he's so much more than just a meme. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and if you wish, like this video and subscribe to my channel. It really does help. Farewell!